My son told me I wasn't good enough for his fiance's family. So when he refused to invite me to his engagement, I went anyway. But when he saw me standing there in that uniform, he dropped the ring and whispered, "Mom, how did you find out?" Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret, and I'm 68 years old. I know that might sound old to some of you, but I've never felt my age until recently, until my own son made me feel like I was something to be ashamed of. For the last 40 years, I've worked as a housekeeper, a waitress, and sometimes I juggled 2 jobs at once, just to give my son David the life I never had, the life I dreamed about as a little girl but never got to live myself. His father left us when David was only 3 years old, just packed his bags one morning and walked out without looking back. No explanation, no apology, just gone. From that day forward, it was just me and David against the world. I raised him alone in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of town where the heat didn't always work in winter and the walls were so thin you could hear every conversation from the neighbors next door. But it was ours, and I made it a home. I sewed his school clothes by hand because I couldn't afford the stores where the other kids shopped. I stayed up late at night stitching patches on his jeans, making sure they looked neat and clean, even if they weren't new. I walked an extra mile to save bus fare so he could have new textbooks and school supplies. My feet would ache by the time I got home, but it didn't matter. Every sacrifice I made with love. Every blister, every skipped meal, every night I went to bed exhausted, it was all for him. David was my whole world. My reason for waking up every morning. My reason for pushing through the exhaustion and the loneliness. He was a bright kid, always had his nose in a book, always asking questions about how things worked. I encouraged that curiosity. I told him he could be anything he wanted to be, and he believed me. He studied hard, got good grades, and earned a scholarship to a prestigious college 3 hours away. I cried the day he left, but they were happy tears, proud tears. I had done it. I had given my son a chance at a better life. He became a financial consultant, got a job at a big firm downtown, and moved into a sleek apartment in a neighborhood I could never afford to visit. The kind of place with a doorman and marble floors and windows that overlooked the city skyline. I was so proud of him, so incredibly proud. I thought I had done everything right. I thought he would never forget where he came from. I thought he would always remember the woman who sacrificed everything so he could have those opportunities. I was wrong. Somewhere along the way, David changed. Or maybe he didn't change. Maybe he just finally showed me who he really was. And the truth is, it broke my heart in ways I didn't know were possible. Because the son I raised, the boy I loved more than my own life, looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't good enough to be part of his new world. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm by the time David turned 30. It wasn't the life I had imagined when he was younger, but I had learned to accept it. He was busy building his career, and I understood that. Or at least, I told myself I did. David called me every Sunday, though the conversations grew shorter each time. What used to be hour-long talks about his week, his friends, his dreams, had shrunk down to 15 minutes of polite questions and surface-level answers. "How are you, Mom?" "I'm good, honey." "How's work?" "Busy, really busy. Listen, I have to run." And then he'd be gone. I spent my days in the same small apartment where I had raised him. The place hadn't changed much over the years. Same worn couch, same chipped kitchen table, same creaky floorboards that groaned under my feet. But it was home. I had a routine that kept me going. Every morning I would wake up early and tend to my small garden on the balcony. Tomatoes, basil, a few flowers that bloomed in the spring. I found peace in watching things grow, in nurturing something with my own hands. I volunteered at the community center 3 days a week, helping serve meals to families who were struggling the way I once had. It felt good to give back, to be useful, to see the grateful smiles on people's faces when they sat down to a hot meal. I wasn't rich. I would never be rich. But I had enough. I had my health, my small routines, my quiet dignity, and I had my memories of David. My apartment was modest, but every wall was filled with photos of my son at every age. His first day of kindergarten, wearing the backpack that was almost as big as he was. His middle school graduation, grinning with his certificate in hand. His high school prom, looking so handsome in the suit I had saved up for months to buy. And my favorite, the day he got his first promotion at the firm, standing in front of his office building with his briefcase and that confident smile. I would dust those frames every single morning, running my fingers gently over the glass, smiling at each memory. Those pictures were proof that I had done something right, that I had raised a good man. I stayed connected with my neighbors, especially Mrs. Chen next door. She had 3 grandchildren who treated me like family. They would knock on my door asking for cookies, and I would bake extra just to see their faces light up. We would video call sometimes, and they would tell me about school, about their friends, about their little dramas that seemed so important to them. It filled a space in my heart that had been empty since David moved away. I lived simply, but I lived with pride. I didn't need much: a roof over my head, food on the table, the occasional phone call from my son. That was enough. Or, at least I convinced myself it was enough. My son had made it. He had escaped the poverty I grew up in. He had a career, an apartment, a future. That was supposed to be the dream, wasn't it? I was supposed to be happy. I was supposed to feel fulfilled. But deep down, in the quiet moments when I was alone, I felt something I didn't want to admit. I felt forgotten, like I had served my purpose, and now I was just a reminder of a past he wanted to leave behind. Retrieve. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday evening in late September. I remember the date because it was David's birthday week, and I had been planning to send him a care package with his favorite homemade cookies and a sweater I'd been knitting for months. The phone rang just as I was sealing the box, and when I saw his name on the screen, my heart lifted the way it always did. My boy was calling. But the moment I answered, something felt off. His voice was different, stiff, formal, like he was reading from a script or talking to a business associate instead of his mother. "Hi, Mom," he said, and there was no warmth in it, no affection, just obligation. I tried to ignore the feeling twisting in my stomach and asked him how he was doing, if he was eating well, if he needed anything. He gave short, clipped answers. "I'm fine. Work is good. Everything's fine." Then he mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that he was seeing someone seriously. Her name was Victoria. She came from a wealthy family, he said. Old money. The kind of people who summered in the Hamptons and had their names on buildings downtown. I felt a rush of excitement despite his cold tone. My son was in love. This was wonderful news. I immediately asked when I could meet her, imagining a Sunday dinner at my apartment, or perhaps I could take them both out to a nice restaurant, somewhere I had been saving up for a special occasion. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that feels heavy, loaded with words that aren't being said. Then he finally spoke. "Soon, Mom. Soon." His voice was evasive, uncomfortable. I pressed him gently, asking if maybe the following weekend would work, or if they were free any evening that week. I could cook, I offered. I could make his favorite pot roast, the one he used to beg me to make when he was younger. "I'll let you know," he said quickly. "I really have to go. Talk soon." And that was it. The call ended. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still in my hand, staring at the box of cookies I had packed with so much love. Soon. He had said soon. But something about the way he said it made me feel like soon actually meant never. Weeks passed after that call, and soon never came. David stopped answering my calls as frequently. When he did pick up, the conversations became even shorter, more distant. Meanwhile, I started seeing things online. I wasn't very good with social media, but Mrs. Chen's granddaughter had helped me set up an account so I could see David's photos. And there they were. Pictures of David and Victoria at charity galas, fancy restaurants, rooftop parties overlooking the city. She was beautiful, poised, always dressed in elegant clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They looked happy. They looked perfect. But I wasn't in any of those photos. Not one. Then one afternoon, while scrolling through the comments on one of his posts, I saw it. "Congratulations on the engagement," someone had written. Multiple people, actually. All celebrating, all excited. I felt my chest tighten. Engagement? My son was engaged, and I was finding out through strangers on the internet? I called him immediately, my hands shaking as I pressed his number. When he answered, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Honey, I saw people congratulating you online. Are you engaged?" Another long pause. Then, carefully, he said, "It's just a small thing, Mom. Very private. We're keeping it low-key." Low-key? There were hundreds of comments. Photos from what looked like a celebration dinner. Nothing about this seemed low-key. But I didn't push. I didn't want to seem overbearing or make him uncomfortable. So I simply said, "Well, congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you." He thanked me quickly and said he had to go. After I hung up, I sat on my couch staring at my phone. Something was wrong. Very wrong. A mother knows. Deep in her bones, she knows when her child is pulling away, when her child is hiding something. I tried to push the feeling down, tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, but it clung to me like a shadow. My son was getting married, and for some reason, he didn't want me to be part of it. I spent the next several days trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that I was being an overly sensitive mother who was reading too much into things. David loved me. Of course he did. He was just busy, caught up in the excitement of his new relationship, his engagement, his rising career. Young people get distracted. It's normal. It's natural. They get swept up in the romance and the planning, and they forget to call home as often. It happens to everyone. It didn't mean anything was wrong. I made excuses for every unreturned call, every text message that went unanswered for days. He's probably in important meetings, I told myself. He's probably traveling for work. He's probably so busy planning the wedding with Victoria that he barely has time to breathe. I imagined him stressed, overwhelmed, juggling 1,000 responsibilities, and I felt guilty for adding to his burden by expecting more of his time. He had his own life now. I needed to respect that. When he stopped visiting altogether, I convinced myself it was perfectly reasonable. The drive from the city to my neighborhood was over an hour in traffic. He worked long hours. Weekends were probably his only time to rest. Why would he want to spend that time sitting in a car? I understood. I really did. Or at least, I tried to. I tried so hard to be the understanding mother, the one who didn't complain, the one who didn't make her son feel guilty for moving on with his life. I suggested coming to visit him instead. I could take the bus into the city, I offered during one of our brief phone calls. I wouldn't stay long, just an hour or two. I could see his apartment, maybe meet Victoria if she was around. I promised I wouldn't be any trouble. There was hesitation in his voice, a slight uncomfortable clearing of his throat. "It's not a great time right now, Mom. We're doing renovations. The place is a mess. Dust everywhere. You wouldn't be comfortable." Renovations. That made sense. I had seen home improvement shows on television. Those projects could take months, and living in a construction zone was miserable. Of course he wouldn't want me to visit during all that chaos. "That's okay, honey," I said quickly. "Just let me know when things settle down." He promised he would. But weeks turned into months, and the invitation never came. I kept waiting. I stayed patient. I stayed hopeful. I told myself that once the engagement was official, once the wedding planning was underway, once things calmed down in his life, he would bring me into his new world. He would introduce me to Victoria properly. We would sit down together over coffee or lunch, and she would see what a kind, loving person I was. She would welcome me into their lives. We would become family. I just had to wait a little longer. Just a little bit longer. At night, lying in bed, I would stare at the ceiling and replay our conversations in my head, searching for hidden meanings, trying to decipher what he really meant beneath his polite, distant words. But I always pushed the dark thoughts away. The thought that maybe, just maybe, my son was ashamed of me was too painful to even consider. It felt like a betrayal of everything we had been to each other, everything I had sacrificed, everything I had given. So I chose to believe the best. I chose to believe in the boy I had raised, the one who used to hug me so tight and tell me I was the best mom in the world. That boy was still in there somewhere. I just had to be patient. I just had to wait for him to remember me, to remember us, to remember that no matter how far he climbed, no matter how successful he became, I would always be his mother. And that had to mean something. It had to. But deep down, in a place I refused to look, I knew something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted between us, and I was terrified to find out what it was. Then one Thursday afternoon in early October, everything changed. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, scrolling through my phone the way Mrs. Chen had taught me when I saw it. A beautiful digital invitation posted on social media by someone named Constance Hartwell. The post was public, shared widely, and the design was stunning. Cream-colored background with elegant gold lettering and delicate floral borders. It announced an engagement celebration for David Monroe and Victoria Hartwell at the Grand View Estate, one of the most exclusive venues in the entire city. I had heard of the Grand View Estate before. Everyone had. It was the kind of place that appeared in magazines, where celebrities got married, where tickets to charity events cost thousands of dollars per person. The invitation specified black tie attire, cocktail hour at 7, dinner and dancing to follow. Over 200 guests were expected. The post had dozens of comments already, people RSVPing with excitement, congratulating the couple, talking about what they planned to wear. My hands started trembling as I scrolled through the responses. 200 guests. A venue that probably cost more than I made in 5 years. A formal celebration with dinner and dancing. This wasn't a small, private affair like David had told me. This was a massive event, and I hadn't received an invitation. Not in the mail, not by email, not even a courtesy phone call. Nothing. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my heart in their fist. There had to be a mistake. Maybe my invitation got lost. Maybe it was stuck in the mail somewhere. These things happened all the time. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called David immediately. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, and I could hear voices and laughter in the background. He was somewhere public, somewhere busy. "Mom?" he said, sounding surprised. "Is everything okay?" My voice came out higher than I intended, strained with barely controlled emotion. "Honey, I saw the invitation online for your engagement party. I didn't get mine in the mail yet. Maybe it got lost? Can you send me another one?" The silence that followed was deafening. The background noise on his end seemed to fade away, like he had stepped into another room. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, careful. "Mom, I didn't send you one." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt dizzy, disoriented, like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me had known for weeks. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. He exhaled, and I could hear the frustration in his breath, the annoyance. Like I was being difficult, like I was making his life harder by simply existing. "Look, Victoria's family is very particular about these things. This event, it's for a certain kind of people. You wouldn't be comfortable there, Mom. Trust me." A certain kind of people. The words echoed in my mind, sharp and cutting. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "A certain kind of people," I repeated, my voice breaking. "David, I'm your mother." His tone shifted then, becoming colder, harder, like he was delivering a business decision rather than talking to the woman who raised him. "Exactly. And her family wouldn't understand. You don't fit in, Mom. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth." It's better this way. You'd feel out of place. Everyone would stare. I'm trying to protect you from that." Protect me? He was protecting himself from me, from his own mother. "David, please," I whispered, tears streaming down my face now. "I don't care about fitting in. I just want to be there for you. I just want to see my son celebrate this moment." But he had already made up his mind. "I have to go, Mom. I'll call you later." And then he hung up, just like that. The line went dead, and I sat there in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling something inside me crack wide open. My son didn't want me at his engagement party because I wasn't good enough, because I was an embarrassment, because the woman who sacrificed everything for him didn't fit into his new, polished life. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, replaying the conversation over and over in my mind until the words became a cruel loop I couldn't escape. By morning, I knew I had to try one more time. I had to make him understand. So I called him back, my hands still trembling from the sleepless night, my voice raw with emotion. "David, please. I've been thinking about what you said, and I need you to hear me. I just want to be there. I don't need a fancy seat at the head table. I can stay in the back. I won't talk to anyone if that's what you want. I just want to see you happy. Please, honey, I'm begging you." There was a long sigh on the other end, the kind of sigh you give when someone just won't let something go, when someone is being unreasonable and exhausting. "Mom, why are you making this so hard? I already explained this to you." His voice was tight with barely concealed irritation. "It's not about where you sit, it's about the optics. Victoria's parents already think I come from nothing. If you show up, dressed in your old clothes, talking about your housekeeping jobs, it'll just confirm everything they already suspect about me." My breath caught in my throat. "So you're ashamed of me," I said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, and he didn't deny it. He didn't rush to reassure me or tell me I was wrong. He just paused, and in that pause, I heard the truth louder than any words could have spoken it. "I'm not ashamed," he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm just being realistic. Victoria's father controls half the commercial real estate in this city. I need them to respect me. I need this merger to work." Merger. That word again. My heart stopped. "Merger?" I repeated. "David, you're talking about your marriage like it's a business deal." He caught himself, tried to backtrack. "That's not what I meant. I just meant that this relationship is important for my future, for my career. Her family has connections I've been trying to access for years. This isn't just about love, Mom. It's about building a life. A real life." A real life. As if the life I gave him wasn't real. As if the years I spent raising him, loving him, sacrificing for him, counted for nothing. "So let me understand this," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of heartbreak and rising anger. "You're marrying this woman partly because of what her family can do for your career, and you don't want me there because I'll hurt your chances of impressing them. Is that what you're telling me?" "Mom, please don't twist my words," he said defensively. "You don't understand how this world works. Image matters, presentation matters. I've worked so hard to get where I am, and I can't let anything jeopardize that, not now. Please, just stay home. Let me handle this my way." And then, before I could respond, he added the words that shattered whatever was left of my heart. "I'll send you pictures afterward. You can see everything. It'll be like you were there." Like I was there, but I wouldn't be, because to him, I was nothing more than a liability, an embarrassment, a reminder of poverty he desperately wanted to forget. Then the line went dead again, and this time, something inside me died with it. But I wasn't the kind of woman who could just sit quietly and accept what I'd been told. I needed answers. I needed to understand how my son, the boy I raised to be kind and compassionate, could turn into someone so cold and calculating. So I did something I never thought I would do. I started digging. I went online and began researching Victoria's family, typing their name into search engines and reading everything I could find. The Hartwells weren't just wealthy, they were powerful. Old money going back 4 generations. Victoria's father, Richard Hartwell, owned Hartwell Commercial Properties, a real estate empire that controlled dozens of office buildings, shopping centers, and luxury developments across 3 states. His net worth was estimated in the hundreds of millions. Her mother, Constance, sat on the boards of museums and charities, her picture appearing regularly in society columns. This was a family that moved in circles I couldn't even imagine. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A business article from 6 months ago about David's firm desperately trying to land Hartwell Commercial Properties as a client. The account would be worth millions in fees and commissions, potentially making David a partner at his firm. The article mentioned that despite multiple pitches, Richard Hartwell had remained uninterested, preferring to work with firms that shared his values and social standing. I sat back in my chair, the pieces clicking together like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. David had started dating Victoria around the same time this article was published, 6 months ago, right when his firm was courting her father's business. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't just about love. My son was dating and now engaged to Victoria Hartwell because she was his key to unlocking her father's business empire. I remembered his slip during our last phone call. I need this merger to work. He hadn't been talking about marriage in the traditional sense. He had been talking about merging his professional ambitions with her family's wealth and influence. Victoria wasn't just his fiancée. She was his business strategy, his ticket to the life he wanted, the life he thought he deserved. And I, his mother, the woman who cleaned toilets and served food so he could get an education, was now a threat to that strategy. I was evidence of his humble beginnings, proof that he came from nothing. In the world of the Hartwells, where ancestry and pedigree mattered, where everyone summered in the Hamptons and wore designer clothes as casually as I wore my old cardigan, I was a problem that needed to be hidden, erased, forgotten. The betrayal went so much deeper than I had imagined. This wasn't just my son being thoughtless or caught up in new love. This was calculated, deliberate. He had weighed his options and decided that his career, his social climbing, his desperate need to be accepted by people like the Hartwells was worth more than the woman who gave him everything. He had traded me for a business deal, and he had done it without a second thought. I closed my laptop and sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, feeling something shift inside me. The sadness was still there, but it was being joined by something else, something harder, something that refused to simply disappear. The night before the engagement party, I sat alone in my apartment, all the lights off except for the small lamp in the corner. The silence was suffocating. I couldn't stop staring at the photographs on my walls, those same pictures I had dusted lovingly every morning for years. But now they felt like they were mocking me, evidence of a love that had only ever gone one direction. I stood up and walked to the wall, touching the frame that held David as a baby, cradled in my arms in the hospital. He had been so small, so fragile, his tiny hand wrapped around my finger. I remembered how terrified I had been bringing him home alone, without a husband to help me, without family to support me. But I had promised him that day that I would give him everything, that I would be enough, that he would never feel the poverty and loneliness I had felt as a child. I moved to the next picture. David on his first bicycle, the one I had bought used from a neighbor and spent a weekend repainting bright blue because it was his favorite color. He was grinning so wide in that photo, his front teeth missing, his joy absolutely pure. I had run alongside him for hours that day, holding the back of his seat, refusing to let go until he was ready, teaching him that I would always be there to catch him if he fell. Then there was his high school graduation photo. I remembered that day so vividly. I had worked double shifts for 3 months to afford the cap and gown rental and the class ring he wanted. I had sat in that auditorium bursting with pride as they called his name, as he walked across that stage with his scholarship letter already in hand. He had hugged me so tight afterward, told me he couldn't have done it without me. "You're the best mom in the world," he had whispered in my ear. I had believed him. God help me, I had believed every word. Where did that boy go? When did I become invisible to him? When did my sacrifices become something to hide rather than honor? I thought about all the nights I had gone to bed hungry so he could eat. The winters I wore the same threadbare coat so he could have a new one. The times I had walked miles in the rain to save bus fare, arriving at work with soaked shoes and aching feet, all so he could have the school supplies he needed, the field trip money, the little extras that would make him feel normal, make him feel like he belonged. I had given him everything: my youth, my health, my dreams. I had poured every ounce of love I had into raising him, believing that love would be enough, that it would matter, that when he grew up and looked back, he would see how much I had sacrificed, and he would value it, cherish it, protect it the way I had protected him. But now, standing in my dark apartment surrounded by these photographs of a son who no longer wanted me, I realized the painful truth. All those sacrifices, all that love, all those years of putting him first meant nothing to him now. I was just a chapter in his story he wanted to skip over, an inconvenient detail in the narrative he was constructing for the Hartwells. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and I cried. I cried until my chest ached and my throat was raw. I cried for the son I had lost, for the mother I had been, for the unconditional love that turned out to have a price tag I could never afford. But somewhere between the tears and the silence, somewhere in the darkest hours of that long night, something inside me shifted. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and took a shaky breath. Then another. I pulled myself up off the floor, my knees protesting, and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the light and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen. My face was lined with age and exhaustion. My hair was gray and thin. I looked every bit of my 68 years, and for a moment I understood exactly why David didn't want me at his fancy party. I didn't look like I belonged in a ballroom at the Grand View estate. I looked like exactly what I was, a working-class woman who had spent her life in service to others. But as I stared at my reflection, something hardened in my chest, a spark of defiance that I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. Who was David to decide I wasn't good enough? Who was he to erase me like I had never existed? Who were the Hartwells to judge my worth based on the size of my bank account or the label on my clothes? I had more dignity in my worn hands than they had in all their mansions and designer outfits combined. I thought about my life, really thought about it. I had worked honest jobs. I had helped people. I had raised a son alone and put him through college. I had volunteered my time to feed families who were hungry. I had lived with integrity and kindness. I had nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. The shame belonged to David, not to me. I made a decision in that moment, standing in my small bathroom at 3 a.m. I wasn't going to sit home and disappear quietly. I wasn't going to let my son pretend I didn't exist. I wasn't going to let him rewrite history and erase the woman who gave him life. If David didn't want me at his engagement party as his mother, then fine. I would find another way to be there. I would go as someone he couldn't ignore. Someone who would be right there in that ballroom, close enough to see everything, to hear everything, to witness exactly what kind of man my son had become. I would see this world he valued more than me. I would see these people he was so desperate to impress. And maybe, just maybe, I would remind him that you can't bury your past. Not when it gave you everything you have. I wasn't going for revenge, not yet. That wasn't who I was. But I was going for truth, for clarity, for closure. I needed to see with my own eyes what he had chosen over me. I needed to understand if there was anything left of the boy I had raised, or if that boy was gone forever, replaced by a stranger who valued money and status over the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. My tears had dried. My jaw was set. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than sadness. I felt determination. I felt strength. I felt like I mattered again, even if my own son had forgotten it. Tomorrow, I would go to that party, and David would see me, whether he wanted to or not. The next morning, I called my old friend Patricia, who had worked in event staffing for over 20 years. My hands were steady as I dialed her number, my mind clear and focused for the first time in days. When she answered, I didn't waste time with small talk. "Patricia, I need a favor, a big one." I explained what I needed, keeping my voice calm and matter of fact. I told her about the engagement party at the Grandview Estate, though I didn't mention it was my son's event. I simply said I needed to work there that evening as catering staff. There was a pause on the other end. "Margaret, why on earth would you want to work a party? You're retired. You should be relaxing, not serving champagne to rich people." I couldn't tell her the real reason. Not yet. So I lied, something I hated doing but felt necessary. "I need the extra money, Patricia. My rent went up and I'm a bit short this month." It wasn't entirely untrue. I was always a bit short. She hesitated, but I heard her typing on her computer. "Let me check what they need. Hold on." 2 minutes felt like an eternity. Then she came back on the line. "You're in luck. They need extra servers for tonight. The event is huge, over 200 guests. They're short-staffed. But Margaret, are you sure? It's going to be a long night on your feet." I assured her I was certain, and she said she'd email me the details. Within an hour, I had instructions to arrive at the service entrance at 5 o'clock sharp. I would receive a uniform when I got there. I spent the rest of the day preparing myself mentally. I took a long shower, washed and dried my hair, put on comfortable shoes that would carry me through hours of standing. I looked at myself in the mirror and practiced keeping my face neutral, expressionless. I had spent decades serving people, being invisible in their homes while I cleaned, unnoticed in restaurants while I refilled their water glasses. I knew how to disappear in plain sight. Tonight, that skill would serve me in ways I never imagined. At 4:30, I took the bus across town to the Grandview Estate. The building was magnificent even from the outside, all white columns and manicured gardens, with a circular driveway where luxury cars were already beginning to arrive. I walked around to the service entrance in the back where other staff members were gathering. A stern-looking woman with a clipboard checked my name and handed me a uniform. Black slacks, white button-down shirt, black vest, and a small name tag that simply said, "Staff." I changed in the bathroom, pinning my hair back tightly, and joined the other servers in the staging area. The coordinator, a woman named Denise, gave us rapid-fire instructions about which doors to use, how to hold the trays, where the kitchen was located, and how to address guests. "You are here to serve, not to be seen. Be polite, be efficient, and stay invisible." These people are paying a fortune for this event, and they expect perfection. Invisible. Exactly what I needed to be. At 6:30, the doors opened, and we were sent into the ballroom with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. And that's when I saw it. The room that would become the stage for the most important confrontation of my life. The ballroom was more breathtaking than I could have imagined. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting soft, golden light across the room. White roses and orchids covered every surface. Their arrangements so elaborate, they must have cost thousands of dollars each. A string quartet played classical music in the corner, their melodies floating elegantly through the air. Round tables draped in ivory silk surrounded a polished marble dance floor, each place setting, featuring fine china and crystal glasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And there, in the center of it all, was David, my son, but he looked like a stranger. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that fit him like it had been made specifically for his body, which it probably had been. His hair was slicked back with expensive product, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He stood with his arm around Victoria, a tall, elegant woman with honey blonde hair swept into an intricate updo. Her dress was a stunning champagne-colored gown that shimmered when she moved, and diamonds sparkled at her throat and wrists. They looked like they had stepped out of a magazine, perfect, polished, untouchable. I stayed in the shadows, moving quietly between the guests, refilling champagne glasses, offering appetizers on silver trays. No one looked at me. No one ever really looked at the servers. We were invisible, just part of the background, like the flowers or the music. I was close enough to hear conversations, to watch David interact with Victoria's family and their wealthy friends. Everyone air-kissed and congratulated each other, talking about vacation homes and yacht clubs and charitable foundations. Victoria's mother, Constance, held court near the center of the room, her voice carrying as she bragged about the family's estate in the Hamptons and their art collection in Manhattan. Her father, Richard Hartwell, stood with a group of men in expensive suits, discussing business deals and political connections. And David moved between these circles with practiced ease, laughing at their jokes, nodding at their stories, playing the role of the perfect future son-in-law. But I watched his eyes. I studied his face, and I saw something there I recognized. Desperation. He was working so hard to fit in, to prove himself worthy, to make them accept him. Every laugh was a little too loud, every agreement a little too eager. He was performing, auditioning for a role in a life that would never truly be his. And he had sacrificed me for this, for the approval of people who would never see him as their equal. Then the speeches began. Richard Hartwell stepped up to a microphone at the front of the room, his voice booming with authority as he welcomed everyone. He spoke about tradition, about family legacy, about the importance of choosing the right partner in life. The crowd applauded politely. Then it was David's turn. My son walked confidently to the microphone, that practiced smile fixed on his face. He began talking about how lucky he was, how Victoria had changed his life, how grateful he was to be joining such an exceptional family. "I've worked incredibly hard to get to this moment," he said, his voice full of pride and ambition. "I've built my career from the ground up, and I couldn't have done it without the support of people who believed in me, who saw my potential, who gave me opportunities to prove myself. People who believed in him." I stood frozen at the edge of the room, a tray trembling slightly in my hands. Not one word about me. Not one mention of the woman who actually raised him, who actually sacrificed everything so he could stand there in that tuxedo making that speech. I had been erased completely from his story, as if I had never existed, as if he had simply appeared in the world fully formed, ready to climb the social ladder. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't stand in the shadows anymore. I couldn't let him rewrite history. I set down my tray on a nearby table and took a step forward, then another. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The room was completely focused on David, who had just pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. The engagement ring. This was the moment. The grand romantic gesture everyone had been waiting for. I kept walking, slowly, deliberately, moving toward the center of the room, toward my son, toward the truth that needed to be spoken. David opened the velvet box, and even from where I stood, I could see the ring sparkle under the chandeliers. It was enormous, the kind of diamond that made people gasp. The room fell completely silent, every eye fixed on him as he turned to Victoria with that practiced, perfect smile. He began lowering himself to one knee, the ring held up like an offering. This was the moment every person in that ballroom had come to witness. The fairy tale proposal, the perfect union of two beautiful people from the right families. And that's when he saw me. Our eyes locked across the crowded ballroom, and I watched the color drain from his face in real time. His confident smile faltered, then disappeared completely. His hand trembled, and the ring, that expensive symbol of his new life, slipped from his fingers. It hit the polished marble floor with a sharp metallic clink that echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. The sound seemed to freeze time itself. Everyone gasped. Heads turned. Victoria looked down at the ring rolling across the floor, then back at David with confusion written all over her face. Her father frowned deeply, clearly displeased by this clumsy disruption of what should have been a perfect moment. Her mother's hand flew to her chest in shock, but David didn't move to pick up the ring. He just stood there, frozen halfway to kneeling, staring at me like he had seen a ghost rise from the grave. I didn't stop walking. I moved forward through the crowd, which parted instinctively, people stepping aside to let me pass. I could feel their eyes on me now, their confusion, their curiosity about why this server was walking toward the center of attention. I reached down calmly, picked up the fallen ring, and held it in my palm for a moment, feeling its weight. Then I walked directly to David and placed it in his still trembling hand. I pulled off my server's apron slowly, deliberately, letting it fall to the floor. The room was so quiet I could hear the fabric hit the marble. Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, clear and steady despite the emotion threatening to choke me, I said, "Hello, David. I thought you said I wouldn't be comfortable here." The whispers started immediately, rippling through the crowd like a wave. People leaned toward each other, confused, trying to understand what was happening. Victoria stepped back from David, her elegant face twisted in bewilderment. "David, who is this?" she asked, her voice sharp with confusion and the first hints of anger. Her mother clutched her husband's arm, and Richard Hartwell's expression had shifted from disapproval to something darker. Concern, suspicion. David's mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. He looked panicked, desperate, like a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble around him. Finally, in barely more than a whisper, he said, "Mom, how did you find out?" The word "mom" detonated in the room like a bomb. The whispers became louder, more urgent. People's faces registered shock, confusion, and in some cases, dawning understanding. Victoria took another step back, her hand dropping from David's arm as if he had suddenly become toxic. "Wait," she said, her voice rising. "This is your mother?" She looked between us, her diamond earrings catching the light as she shook her head. "But you told me. You said your mother passed away years ago. You said you were alone in the world. You said—" Her voice trailed off as the full weight of his lie settled over the room. David's face crumbled. He tried to reach for Victoria's hand, but she jerked away from him. "Victoria, please, let me explain," he begged. But she was already backing away, horror and betrayal written across her perfect features. I looked at my son, this stranger in an expensive tuxedo, and felt a strange calm wash over me. "You don't need to explain to her, David, but maybe you need to explain to everyone here who you really are." I turned slowly to face the crowd, to face all these people in their designer clothes and their jewelry and their judgment. "I want everyone in this room to know something about the man you're celebrating tonight." My voice remained steady as I addressed the silent ballroom. "This man you're toasting, the one you think built himself from the ground up, he didn't do it alone. I raised him. By myself. His father left when he was 3 years old, and from that day forward, it was just the two of us against the world. I could see people's faces changing, some looking uncomfortable, others leaning in with genuine interest. I worked as a housekeeper and a waitress, sometimes holding 2 jobs at once. I wore the same winter coat for 7 years, so he could have a new one each season. I walked miles in the rain to save bus fare, so he could have the school supplies he needed, the field trip money, the little extras that would help him fit in with kids whose parents had more than we did. David stood frozen, his face ashen, unable to speak or move. I continued, my voice growing stronger. I sewed his clothes by hand. I stayed up until midnight helping him with homework after working 10-hour shifts. I sacrificed everything, every dream I ever had, every comfort, every luxury, so that my son could have opportunities I never did. So he could go to college, so he could become successful, so he could stand here tonight in this beautiful ballroom. I paused, letting my words sink in. And he repaid me by telling his fiancée that I was dead, by refusing to invite me to his own engagement party because I would embarrass him, because I don't fit in with people like you. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Then Victoria spoke, her voice shaking with emotion. You told me your mother died when you were in college. You let me believe you were orphaned. You let me feel sorry for you. She looked at David with such betrayal in her eyes. Everything you told me about yourself was a lie. Richard Hartwell's face had turned a deep red. Young man, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but no one treats their mother this way. No one. I don't care how successful you think you are. He turned to his wife and daughter. Constance, Victoria, we're leaving. Now. Victoria pulled the engagement bracelet from her wrist and dropped it at David's feet. I can't marry someone who would do this, someone who would lie about something so fundamental. If you can betray the woman who gave you life, you'd betray anyone. Her voice cracked, including me. She turned and walked toward the exit, her parents following close behind. Other guests began gathering their things, the spell of the elegant evening completely broken. I heard fragments of conversations as people passed. Absolutely disgraceful. Can you imagine? Poor woman. What kind of man does that to his own mother? Within minutes, the grand ballroom that had been filled with 200 guests was nearly empty. The string quartet had stopped playing. The servers stood awkwardly near the walls, unsure what to do, and in the center of it all stood David, alone, the engagement ring still in his hand, surrounded by abandoned champagne glasses and wilting roses. He finally looked at me, tears streaming down his face, his perfect facade completely shattered. Mom, I'm so sorry, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted them to accept me. I just wanted to be good enough. His voice broke. Please don't leave me. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw not the confident businessman, but the scared little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay the way I had done 1,000 times before, but I couldn't. Not this time. I never left you, David, I said quietly, my voice heavy with sadness. You left me. You chose money and status over the woman who gave you everything, and now you have to live with that choice. I turned toward the exit, my back straight, my head held high. Mom, please, he called after me, his voice desperate and broken. I paused at the doorway and looked back one final time. You wanted a life without me in it. Well, now you have it. I hope it's everything you thought it would be. Then I walked out into the cool night air, leaving behind the glittering ballroom, the scattered roses, and the son who had forgotten what really mattered. I took the bus home that night, still wearing my server's uniform. The city lights blurred past the windows, but I barely noticed them. I felt strangely light, as if I had been carrying a weight I didn't know was there and had finally set it down. When I got back to my small apartment, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the quiet street below. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The next few days brought unexpected changes. Word of what happened spread quickly through David's social circles. A week later, I heard through Patricia, who heard it from someone in the catering company, that Victoria had officially broken off the engagement. She wanted nothing to do with a man who could lie so easily about something so important. Her father, Richard Hartwell, had immediately pulled his company's consideration of David's firm. The lucrative contract David had been chasing, the one he had sacrificed his own mother for, vanished overnight. David called me repeatedly over the following days, 7 times the first day, 5 times the second, then 3, then 1. I let every call go to voicemail. I listened to his messages once, heard the desperation and regret in his voice, the apologies tumbling over each other, the promises that he would do better, be better. But I didn't call back. Not out of cruelty or revenge, but because some wounds run too deep for a simple apology to heal. Some betrayals change the relationship forever. He had shown me who he truly was when he thought it didn't matter, when he thought I would never know. And I couldn't forget that. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my own life. I started volunteering more hours at the community center, finding joy in serving meals to families who reminded me of my younger self. People who were struggling but still had their dignity, their kindness, their humanity intact. I spent more time with Mrs. Chen and her grandchildren, who treated me with the love and respect my own son couldn't manage. I planted new flowers in my balcony garden, watching them grow and bloom, finding hope in small, simple things. I even treated myself to a few small luxuries I had always denied myself. A new coat, soft and warm, in a deep blue color I loved. A haircut at an actual salon instead of trimming it myself in the bathroom. A hardcover book I'd been wanting to read. These weren't expensive things, but they felt revolutionary. For the first time in decades, I was putting myself first, and it felt good. It felt right. It felt like I mattered. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the engagement party, I was watering my plants when I saw a car pull up outside my building. David stepped out looking thinner than I remembered, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time, just staring up at my window. I watched him from behind the curtain. He raised his hand as if to wave, then dropped it. After 10 minutes, he got back in his car and drove away. I didn't go down to meet him. Maybe one day I would be ready to talk. Maybe one day we could begin to repair what he had broken. But that day wasn't today. This story isn't just about a son who betrayed his mother. It's about what happens when we lose sight of what truly matters, when we let ambition and greed and the desperate need for approval corrupt our values. David thought he could trade his past for a better future, that he could erase the people who loved him when he had nothing in exchange for people who only valued what he could offer them. But life doesn't work that way. You can't build anything real, anything lasting, on a foundation of lies and shame. Family isn't about wealth or status or impressing the right people. It's about loyalty. It's about standing beside the people who stood beside you when times were hard. It's about remembering where you came from and honoring the sacrifices that brought you to where you are. David forgot that, and it cost him everything: his relationship, his career opportunity, his integrity, and most painfully, his mother's trust. I don't know if David and I will ever fully heal from this. Some part of me still loves him, still remembers the sweet boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. But another part of me knows that our relationship will never be what it was. Trust, once broken so completely, is nearly impossible to rebuild. Maybe that's the lesson he needed to learn. That some things, once lost, can never truly be recovered. That the people who love you unconditionally are rare and precious, and taking them for granted is a mistake you may spend the rest of your life regretting. As for me, I've made peace with what happened. I know my worth now, not because of what I can do for others, but simply because I exist, because I lived my life with integrity and love, because I gave everything I had to raise my son right, even if he didn't appreciate it. That was never about him. It was about who I am. And no one, not even my own child, can take that away from me. So I want to ask you, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have stayed home like he asked, or would you have shown up to confront him? If your own child betrayed you this way, could you forgive them? Let me know in the comments below. Your perspective matters. And if this story touched you, if it made you think about the relationships in your own life, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. and subscribe for more powerful stories about real people facing impossible choices. These stories matter because they remind us what's truly important in life: family, loyalty, love, the things money can never buy. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me when my own son couldn't.